Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Srila Prabhupada ki jai. I just want to take a moment. I recommend, if you have a chance and can find it, it's in the database, an explanation Srila Prabhupada gave, I think in 1971, of this song. It's really something. I may, if I remember, I can try to look for it later and like post it on my Facebook timeline or something. What in the world? Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Om Namo
So today we'll take a look at Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 7, Text 13.
Second word. It's paramishtam, long A.
Ah.
Very rare mistake. Correct.
Ya parameshtam dishanam adhitishtan na kanchana pratyutishthed iti bruyur dharmam te na param vidu yaparameshtyam dishanam adhitishtan kanchana pratyutishthed iti bruyur dharmam te na parang vidu yaparameshtyam dishanam adhitishtan kanchana pratyutishthed iti bruyur dharmam te na parang vidu yaparameshtyam dishanam adhitishtan kanchana pratyutishthed iti bruyur dharmam te na parang vidu. Others?
Parameshtam dishanam adhitishtan kanchana pratyutishthed iti bruyur dharmam te na param vidu.
Ross, you can do it.
Parameshtam dishanam
Paramishtam dishanam
adhitishtan kanchana
adhitishtan kanchana
pratyutishthed iti bruyur
pratyutishthed iti bruyur
dharmam te na param vidu.
dharmam te na param vidu. You can do it.
Ya parameshtyam dishanam
Paramishtam dishanam
adhishtan kanchana pratyutishthed iti bruyur
pratyutishthed iti bruyur
dharmanam tena param vidu.
Dharmam te na parang vidu. Anyone in interwebs land? He's not here. Vijay Krishna is shunning me. Word to word. Ya. Anyone who. Parameshtyam. Royal. Dishanam. Throne. Adhitishtan. Sitting on. Na. Not. Kanchana. Anyone. Pratyutishthed. Should rise before. Iti. Thus. Bruyu. Those who say. Dharmam. Codes of religion. Te. They. Na. Not. Param. Higher. Vidu. No. Translation and purport. By His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, if a person says one who is situated on the exalted throne of a king should not stand up to show respect to another king or a Brahmana, it is to be understood that he does not know the superior religious principles. Responsively, please. If a person says, one who is situated on the exalted throne of a king should not stand up to show respect to another king or a Brahmana, it is to be understood that he does not know the superior religious principles. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says in this regard that when a president or king is sitting on his throne, he does not need to show respect to everyone who comes within his assembly. But he must show respect to superiors like his spiritual master, Brahmanas, and Vaisnavas. There are many examples of how he should act. When Lord Krishna was sitting on his throne, and Nārada fortunately entered his assembly, even Lord Krishna immediately stood up with his officers and ministers to offer respectful obeisances to Nārada. Nārada knew that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Krishna knew that Nārada was a devotee. But although Krishna is the Supreme Lord and Nārada is the Lord's devotee, the Lord observed the religious etiquette. Since Nārada was a brahmachari, a brahmana, and an exalted devotee, even Krishna, while acting as a king, offered his respectful obeisances unto Nārada. Such is the conduct visible in the Vedic civilization. A civilization in which the people do not know how the representative of Nārada or Krishna should be respected, how society should be formed, and how one should advance in Krishna consciousness. A society concerned only with manufacturing new cars and new skyscrapers every year, or maybe I should say skyscrapers, every year, and then breaking them into pieces and making new ones. Refer to yesterday's class. May be technologically advanced, but it is not a human civilization. A human civilization is advanced when people follow the Chaturvanya system, the system of 4 orders of life. There must be ideal first-class men to act as advisors, second-class men to act as administrators, third-class men to produce food and protect cows, and fourth-class men who obey the 3 higher classes of society. One who does not follow the standard system of society should be considered a 5th-class man. A society without Vedic laws and regulations will not be very helpful to humanity. As stated in this verse, dharmang te na parang vidu. Such a society does not know the aim of life and the highest principle of religion. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Mukhaṁ karoti vāchalam pangum langhayate girim jatkripatamahang bande Shri Gurun dinataranam. Shri Chaitanya manobhishtam stapitam yena bhutale svayam rupakadamayam dadati svapadantikam. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyashta Kripa Sindhuya Eva Chapatitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Yaparameshtam tishanam adhitishtam nakanchana pratyutishthed iti bruyor dharman te na parang vidu. If a person says one who is situated on the exalted throne of a king should not stand up to show respect to another king or Brahmana, it is to be understood that he does not know the superior religious principles. So this brings to mind, especially in because Srila Prabhupada refers to it in his purport. First, well, I don't know if it's first, but because they kind of come to me simultaneously. But we'll deal with this first. So Krishna tells us in the 4th chapter, we know this verse, many of us, Chaturvanyam maya shrishtam gunakarma vibhaga shahatasya kartaram api mam vidya kartaram avyayam. Krishna says, according to the 3 modes of material nature and the work ascribed to them, the 4 divisions of human society were created by me. Very interesting syntax in that sentence. Quite often, when we're teaching writing, we teach students to avoid the passive voice except for a particular purpose. And that is to emphasize. Here we see we're emphasizing what ordinarily might have been the subject of the sentence. I created these 4 systems. But Srila Prabhupada, the way Srila Prabhupada translates it is the 4 divisions of human society, so they become the subject of that clause, created by me. Because one reason that we would advise our students against using the passive voice, which is a kind of a real easy thing for us to fall into, and it becomes a sometimes an important part of government statements. This passive voice. So what it does is it can I'm not finding the word I'm looking for. It can kind of obscure what's happening. It can obscure the action. You know, it downplays the verb, and the verb we end up with a passive verb, some form of to be. Was created by me. But sometimes you want to use this passive voice if you want to put this, what would have been the subject of the verse, in a power position in that sentence, at the very end of the sentence. So here, Srila Krishna is emphasizing, yes, these were created by me. And then he says, and although I am the creator of the system, you should know that I am yet the non-doer, being unchangeable. In other words, I created this system. But, and he'll follow it. We see that the Varnashram system is very prominent in Krishna's Leela, right? I mean, that's how society is ordered in the culture in which Krishna appeared and engaged in his different pastimes, whether in Vrindavan or Mathura or Dwaraka. And there is this sort, and so that it suggests a hierarchy, a sort of social stratification. But then he says, I created this, but I don't have anything to do with it. Even though he doesn't have anything to do with it, even though he is not bound by it, we see him respecting that. And here we see Krishna is not really explaining the Varnashram system. He's just saying, this is my doing. Yeah, I did this. And then, you know, he ends by saying, but it doesn't bind me. And essentially it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with me. Now, we know the Varnashram system was created in order to give a structure to society that allows people, that actually encourages all of humankind to become progressively more Krishna conscious, progressively at least more human, as Srila Prabhupada points out in today's purport. Without some sort of order, it's not human society. Even animal societies have order, right? A wolf pack, there's an alpha male. And I remember seeing this, I guess it was kind of became a meme in social media, where there's a pack of wolves going through the snow, and what you see is that the wolf at the end is actually the alpha. You know, he's not leading them in front, he's leading them in back to protect them from anyone who might come. He leads from behind. Kind of I just found that a really interesting thing. So we have this hierarchy, we have this sort of stratification according to Varna, the Brahmanas, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, and the Shudras. And ordinarily, people might think, well, the king sitting on his throne, that's, you know, that's his proper situation. Anybody who comes in, they're coming in to pay tribute to him. But a real king, Srila Prabhupada is pointing out, someone who actually understands superior religious principles, knows that the real thing is where a person is situated. So the essence of Varnashram Dharma is essentially, I think we were discussing with someone yesterday, I don't remember whom now, but the real essence is do what you're good at, naturally good at, and that you enjoy, and you do it for the benefit of the greater society, and ultimately for the satisfaction of the Lord. And we see right at the beginning of the Bhagavatam that if that one element is missing, if we don't engage in these things with an eye toward increasing our, as the Bhagavatam puts it, our attachment for hearing about the Nam Guna, Rupa, and Leela of the Lord, the transcendental name, form, qualities, and pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it's Shrama Eva Hi Kevalam. Nothing but a waste of time. Kevalam, simply a waste of time. Certainly, Eva, right? Shrama Eva Hi Kevalam. It's just, you know, you're just kind of piddling your life away. You're going through the motions of, you know, being a human being, but you're missing the real point of human life. Just recently I read somewhere, I think Srila Prabhupada described human life as, or maybe it was the Bhagavatam, as where there, you know, there's this discernment, this sense of discernment that doesn't exist in other animals. I mean, in other creatures. We think of ourselves as the crown of creation, right? Generally. And for people my age, that kind of evokes a really interesting image, because there was a musical group in the 60s, mid and late 60s, called Jefferson Airplane, and one of their albums was Crown of Creation. And what was the cover art? Thermonuclear explosion. So Srila Prabhupada said, if that's what we live for, to make more and more horrible weapons, that's not human life. I was talking the other day about World War I. A war it was a war so horrible that they thought, they declared it, the whole world declared, aspirationally perhaps, that this is the war to end all wars, because we can't bear. How could we ever do this again? Destroying cities, so much collateral damage. Oh, I guess we were talking about that in Tucson. Because there was when I mentioned this, I said, so what do we call that? And one devotee who I had met in Denver, but who lives, I think he lives in Arizona, he and his wife, and they had spent some time on Maui, but decided it wasn't for them. He said collateral damage. Of course, an older person. And this is something that I kind of grew up with myself as an intelligence analyst in the Navy in the late 60s, this business of collateral damage. Because part of my job was to review and analyze aerial reconnaissance photography of, and I'll put it bluntly, what we were doing to Southeast Asia during that period. And it was awful. And it literally broke my heart and changed me, radicalized me. Just my daily work. So if that's the goal of our life, if that's what we're spending all our money on, all our R&D goes to creating more and more horrible weapons, that's not human life. That's just madness. It's not even animal life. Most indigenous cultures figured out a way to live on the earth so that they didn't destroy it so quickly that you could actually see it happen. So you go to South America, like Brazil, Argentina, where the planet's becoming denuded so people can raise cattle to sell their carcasses to satisfy the palates of North Americans and Western Europeans. It's crazy. It's just madness. It doesn't make any sense at all. The Earth's lungs, right? So that's not human society. Human society, and if we're so stuck in the rigid varnashram thing that we miss the essence of it, so we come up with something like the contemporary caste system, where it's determined by birth, not by guna and karma, as Krishna says in this verse in the 4th chapter, not by your qualities and your activities, then that's not human society. Varnashram really means helping everybody become employed in a way that's useful to society in a manner that's elevating, that's ultimately meant for satisfying the Supreme Lord. But you can do that, you can have that hierarchy, you can have that stratification without satisfaction of the Lord, and that's like, some parts of contemporary India, where, people are, still you have, guys who work in factories going around parading the thread they got when they were 8 years old, because their father was born in a Brahmin family, but he's a clerk in an office, and you turn out to be somebody who can run computers, so you're kind of like keeping this factory going or something like that. But you're proud that you're a Brahmana. But the business of the Brahmanas is not that. Patana patana yajana yajana dana pratigraha. That's the business of the Brahmanas. Patana patana yajana yajana dana pratigraha. Studying the scriptures and teaching the conclusions of the scriptures. Worshipping the Lord and teaching others to worship the Lord. Giving in charity and accepting charity. Of course, sometimes Brahmanas nowadays, even some of ours, might miss that dana part, that giving and charity part. My business is accepting charity. Somebody wants to give me some donation, that's cool. But what they also miss is that when the sun goes down, you're not supposed to have any more assets than you did when you got up in the morning, which is 0. Whatever you still have, whatever assets you still have, you need to distribute them in charity at the end of the day. So anyway, so that's not real human society. Anyway, so that's a whole thing. The essence of that society is what we see in 2 verses in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam. Sve svetikara yanishta saguna parikirtita. That we have to behave we have to be able to discern what are my qualities. We have to be able to see our real situation and behave accordingly. I think as one of the Navyogendras says, that's a good quality. And not recognizing that, not behaving like that, that's a flaw. That's a fault. It's just the opposite. So we have these higher principles of religion that whatever your position, if you see someone who you know to have some qualities superior to your own, you stop and show respect. We saw the consequences of neglecting that in the case of Ramaharshan Sutta. He was actually elected by all the sages to sit on the Vyasasana and, discourse on the absolute truth. A Brahmana isn't somebody with Prabhupada used to say 2 paisa string over his shoulder. I think now they're like $1.50 in a lot of gift shops or something, I don't know. I make my own, so I don't know. Not 2 paisa anymore. I don't even know what a paisa is. But he's repeatedly, dozens of times in his books and in his talks, Brahmajanatiti Brahmana. A Brahmana is someone who knows the absolute truth, who knows Brahman. That's the real Brahmana. So when we see someone who we know has superior qualities, qualities superior to our own, then naturally we're going to show respect. That's an honest person. That's human life. So in the case of Ramaharshan Sutta, he's sitting on the Vyasasan, apparently quite legitimately, having been elected by the assembly of sages to represent the absolute truth. But when the absolute truth presents himself right in his face, he doesn't respond. He's just sitting there. I'm the big shot, and it's some Kshatriya, and I'm a Brahmana. I'm the son of a great sage, and all the I've been validated. That's all been validated by this assembly of sages. And here comes some. We don't know what their caste is. Born to a Kshatriya mother and father, but grew up among Vaishyas. I'm going to stand up for him. So and if we don't know, we can find it in Srila Prabhupada's Kṛṣṇa book. Balaram dispatched him unceremoniously with a kusha straw, which is auspicious but also weird. He killed a guy with a... you've seen kusha mats, it's hard to figure how you can just throw it at someone like a dart and it's actually going to off him, But we see the proper example in Kṛṣṇa. When Sudama Vipra, Krishna's old school buddy, comes to see him in Dwaraka, what does Krishna do? Krishna gets down off his throne, seats him on his own bed, washes his feet, and sprinkles the water on his head. And here we see Srila Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada referring to Krishna's reception of Narada Muni in Dwarka. So I think I can do this without getting into too much trouble. Oh dear, what happened? I've lost my place. So this is in chapter 9 of Kṛṣṇa book. We know Narada Muni goes to visit Krishna in Dwarka, and Krishna is exhibiting his opulence to Narada Muni. He's like showing off. Narada Muni visits all these different palaces of Krishna, and he sees that Krishna has expanded himself into 16,108 different forms, all engaged in different activities with different members of his different families. And Narada's thinking, okay, so we know that there's this thing where you can expand yourself 8 times, but it's all going to be like mirror images or something. They're all going to be doing the same thing. But here, Krishna's expanded himself into over 16,000 forms, and each one is doing a completely different thing with one of his families from what the others are doing. And he's saying, this is amazing. So, as Srila Prabhupada says in his purport, he fortunately, by his good fortune, he enters one of Krishna's palaces and he approaches the Lord. So, Srila Prabhupada describes the palaces, but for time I'm going to skip to here. Nārada saw that Lord Krishna was sitting, so he enters one of them. Nārada saw that Lord Krishna was sitting with Rukmini Devi, the mistress of that particular palace, who was holding the handle of a chamara whisk. Even though there were many thousands of maidservants equally beautiful and qualified, and of the same age, Rukmini Devi personally was engaged in fanning Lord Krishna. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, worshipped even by Nārada. Yet as soon as Krishna saw Nārada enter the palace, he got down immediately from Rukmini's bedstead. He's not entering the sabha, the assembly. Oh, Krishna's in Queen Rukmini's quarters, in her chambers. And so he approaches, and Krishna's sitting on Rukmini's bed, just as we saw with Sudama Vipra. Krishna sat Sudama on his bed, and washed his feet and took the water on his own head. So Krishna got down immediately from Rukmini's bedstead and stood up to honor him. Lord Krishna is the teacher of the whole world, and in order to instruct everyone how to respect a saintly person like Narada Muni, he bowed down, touching his helmet to the ground. Not only did Krishna bow down, but he also touched to the feet of Nārada, and with folded hands requested him to sit on his chair. Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the most worshipable spiritual master of everyone. The Ganges water, which emanates from his feet, sanctifies the three worlds. All qualified Brahmanas worship him. Brahmajanatiti Brahmana. And therefore he is called Brahmanyadeva. He's the Lord of the Brahmanas. Brahmanya means one who fully possesses the Brahminical qualifications, which are said to be as follows: truthfulness, self-control, purity, mastery of the senses, simplicity. Simplicity has a couple of meanings. One is, you don't have a lot of extra junk in your life, but it also means the opposite of duplicity. Right? You always speak in a straightforward manner. It's the opposite of diplomacy, in a sense. Although, sometimes a little diplomacy is called for. Sometimes you want to speak gently, but you're not going to be two-faced. That's the thing. Simplicity, full knowledge by practical application, vijnana. What's the difference between jnana and vijnana? Jnana is, book knowledge. Vijnana is realized knowledge. You've assimilated that knowledge into your life. Just like when Grandma used to tell, I don't know if Grandma really ever said this, but we say that. Grandma used to tell you, you need to chew, Billy, you need to chew each mouthful 30 times at least. So that, the saliva will mix in there, all the enzymes will break it down, and it'll digest fully and actually be assimilated by your body. So jnana means book knowledge, means I can recite I can tell you which chapter and verse this is from. And I can tell you, you got to do it. But vijnana means I've assimilated, I've made it part of my life. Realized knowledge. Knowledge by practical application and engagement in devotional service. Lord Krishna possesses all these qualities, and he's worshipped by persons who themselves possess these qualities. So we see here Krishna is enjoying, Srila Prabhupada says in Dwarka, he's enjoying the pastimes of a perfect human being. So when he washed the feet of the sage Nārada and took the water on his head, Nārada did not object, knowing well that the Lord did so to teach everyone how to respect saintly persons. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, who is the original Narayana, and eternal friend of all living entities, thus worshipped the sage Nārada according to Vedic regulative principles. He welcomed him with sweet nectarian words, addressed him as Bhagavan, or one who was self-sufficient, possessing all knowledge, renunciation, strength, fame, beauty, and other similar opulences. And he particularly asked Nārada, "What can I do in your service?" Krishna is showing us, and Nārada is receiving this. Nārada is not saying, "No, God, you're the Supreme Person. You're God, for God's sake. No, I can't do this." Nārada is saying, "Yes, let us show how you do it. Let's show how you do it." This is a lesson that I'm still learning after 10.5 years of accepting the sannyas ashram. I didn't know how it was going to be before I did it until like later the day when I accepted sannyas, and then I would walk into a room and everybody's heads would hit the deck. And I just thought, God. I mean, these are the people yesterday I was hanging out with them, joking with them, sometimes taking their jabs, taking their insults or something like that. Not afraid to embarrass myself in front of, because I'm just a person, just a messed up kid from Lompoc. But all of a sudden I walk into a room and all my friends are like, and I said, what would I do? At first I did what I always did. I would get down and respond by returning the respect. And then they were going and complaining, and I got called on the carpet. The devotees are complaining that you're returning their obeisances when they show their respect for your ashram. I said, well, that's what I did yesterday. And nobody objected. It's just natural. This is what I've been doing for, going on 50 years now. And, he said, okay. And I said, I didn't know how uncomfortable it would be until that actually happened. And then the response was, so what's more important, that you're uncomfortable or that they're uncomfortable? Okay, check and mate. So I'm still working on that. And boy, did I have some work to do with that in Mayapur. Sometimes there's people kicking their shoes off and hitting the deck as I'm just walking along, chanting japa, minding my own business, going to the temple or going to the TOVP for our meetings or whatever I was doing. And other people, because, Indian people, walking right over me. And sometimes the same thing, both things happening at the same moment. And I'm just standing there, breathe, just keep breathing, buddy. It'll be okay. You can do this, And just honoring, because their culture is like that, the Indian people's culture and the devotees' culture, the Vaishnava culture is like that. I'm representing the Lord as a sannyasi. I'm supposed to be. And so following Narada Muni, I was just, okay, this is cool, this is nice. They have these sentiments, and that's a good thing. And it's not about you. It's about the Lord. It's about Srila Prabhupada. This is Srila Prabhupada brought us into this life, and so we have to respect that. So Narada Muni shows also his teaching by, cool as a cucumber, accepting Krishna's worship without making a fuss. He knows what the deal is. He knows I am Krishna's eternal servant, right? That's all I am. I'm nothing else. But when Krishna shows his respect, because of Narada Muni's station in life, because of the degree of his realization, Krishna is showing people, this is how we treat people like Narada Muni. And Narada Muni says, this is how we treat people who are self-realized. Even Krishna can do that. It's all right. So, as Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says in his commentary, and Srila Prabhupada cites in his purport to this verse, there are principles of religion, and there are higher principles of religion. Therefore, Krishna says at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, after repeating the essence of the Gita, Manmana bhava madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskar, the most secret of all secrets. We see that right in the 9th chapter, the most confidential knowledge, and Krishna builds and builds and builds, and he's kind of telling us more and more just how wonderful bhakti is, that even if someone has bhakti for me, even if they slip and do awful, awful, awful things, sudurachar, not just durachar, but sudurachar, really, really bad stuff, still they're to be considered saintly because that's there. That little bit of bhakti's there. We don't have to do bhakti, we have to do varnashram perfectly to get the results. We do have to do jnana perfectly to get the results. We do have to do yoga perfectly to get the results. We see this in the 5th chapter of the 1st canto. But bhakti, even if you mess it up, you never lose anything. Krishna tells us in the Gita, and Narada Muni tells Vyasadeva in the 5th chapter of the 1st canto. Even if you mess up, even if you fall away from your practice, from your service, Vishwanath Chakravarti says, due to poor determination, Srila Prabhupada says, due to bad association. I think the two kind of go hand in hand. Still, you should understand that person is a rasagraha. They're haunted by bhakti. As if Vishwanath says, by a ghost you can't shake. It's an amazing purport. Exploded my heart when the first time I read it. And it kind of like drew me into a writing project that I have yet to complete, and I got to get back to work on. Kind of a Bhakti Mahatmya, I guess, or something, a little Bhakti Mahatmya, drawing from different places, including Jiva Goswami, who, anyway, it's a whole different thing. Okay, I'll stop here. Any comments, questions, any discussion?
Maharaj, before I forget, what was that purport that exploded in your heart?
Canto 1, Chapter 5, Text 19. Text 17 and 19 work very well together. to show how bhakti, it draws, as I often say, oh, here I am, I'm doing the gesture again, draws a very bright line between bhakti and everything else.
1, 5, 17 through 19.
Yeah,
Awesome. Thank you.
thank you. Anything else?
Lovely echoes of the not showing proper respect. I was thinking of the story of the Kumaras, the story of Daksha and Lord Shiva, the story of
Oh, God.
Ramaharshan. There's probably others.
Yeah, such instances are legion in the Bhagavatam. You'll find it at least once in every canto. It's quite, Jai and Vijay, they were a little rude. And these guys weren't even devotees. The Kumaras reflected on it themselves afterwards. They just thought, oh my God, these are like pure devotees. And they were a little rude to us. They challenged our adhikar for entering Vaikuntha Loka. And they got to go live in the material world? What is going to happen? What's our fate? We actually cursed pure devotees of the Lord. And so the Lord Narayan reassured them. He saw what was going on in their hearts, and he said, don't worry about it. This actually never happens. This whole thing was a big setup by me, because Jai and Vijay, being my intimate associates, they know my heart, and they know that every once in a while I like to mix it up, show my Vira rasa by engaging in duking it out with somebody. And there's no one here in Vaikuntha Loka who's going to do that. It just doesn't fit. It's all awe and reverence. It's all Aishvarya, all Gaurava. There's no Vishrambha here. But they know that I need to do this. And so they wanted to please me. So I wanted to please them. I wanted to please their desire to please me by making this whole big arrangement. So don't worry about it. It's cool.
Wonderful illustrative example. Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Anything else?
Hare Krishna, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thank you for a wonderful class and discussion. Prabhu, Maharaj, I have a question. When you mentioned about Varnashram, so does birth has any good quality or anything, like being born in a good family or Brahman family, does it have any good effect if the parents are like in Bhakti and all this Brahman family, and how do we understand and differentiate that? I know sometimes Brahmana family being born doesn't mean anything, but at the same time, if you can talk about a little bit. Thank you.
Can you put yours on mute, please?
Srila Prabhupada talks about, we see that, Srila Prabhupada talks about it in that same purport, the purport to 1519, that if we don't complete our bhakti practice, then even if we don't do it in this lifetime, then we get an opportunity in another lifetime. Being born, as we see in the Gita, being born in a nice Vaishya, very wealthy Vaishya family, or a nice Brahmana family, or even a family of the Vaisnavas. And Srila Prabhupada says he claims this as his own situation. I was born in a family of nice Vaishnavas. So therefore, there must have been some previous practice, and that's the result. So although we tend to want to think of him as a Nitya Siddha, he presented himself as a sadhana siddha, generally. There are other times where he indulged our sentiment, but generally he spoke, he presented himself as a sadhana siddha, and so he says this is, but what he says in that purport is that those who are even more fortunate may find themselves in a completely destitute situation. And, everything's lost, like the Brahmana of Avanti. Really, really wealthy, he'd accumulated all kinds of wealth, but he was so stingy, he wouldn't even spend money on his own sense gratification, for God's sake, not to speak of his family. And everybody ultimately became completely disgusted with him and started, siphoning his assets away until he was left with nothing and no one. And then he said, oh, okay, I get it. And he accepted sannyas. The sannyasis, Srila Prabhupada initiated his disciples into the sannyasa ashram. He had them recite this verse from the song of the Avantipur Brahmana. Etan sa astaya paratmanishtam madhyasitum purvatamaya maharshabhi. Ahang tirishyami durantapadam tamo mukundangrini shevayava. This is his statement of his determination to cross over the ocean of material suffering, over the ocean of birth and death, by taking complete shelter of the service of Mukunda, following in the footsteps of the great acharyas. Mahaprabhu himself chanted this verse. You see this in the 3rd chapter of Madhya Lila. Just after taking sannyas, he was chanting this verse repeatedly. So Srila Prabhupada had his sannyasi disciples. He had them, even before Chaitanya Charitamrita was published, he had them chant the Sanskrit 3 times, read the translation, and read that purport from the 3rd chapter of Madhya Lila. I know this because I saw it in person when my friend Siddha Swarupananda accepted sannyas on the occasion of the installation of our Sri Sri Panchatattva over 50 years, almost 51 years ago now in New Navadvip. And then I found it also in the Veda base when my friend Sudama, just before that, shortly, just a couple of weeks before that, accepted sannyas in Tokyo. So yeah, Srila Prabhupada had him. So this was 1970. These were both in 1972. So how did I get there? Oh, so yeah, Srila Prabhupada's purport to 1519. He says those who are even more fortunate will be really chastised in this lifetime so that they come to their senses. And they think, and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes about this in his commentary. He says, even if they fall away once, twice, or 3 times, eventually they think, oh, let me not mess up again. I will completely dedicate myself now, from this day, to worshiping the Lord. So we mess up, and we mess up, and we mess up again. I remember when, shortly after Gurudas, our godbrother Gurudas accepted sannyas, he came to Hawaii, and I don't remember exactly how we organized this because we didn't even have a phone. I don't even know how I knew he was on the island. But we invited Gurudas to our home, our humble little home in Honomu on the Big Island for dinner. And he told me, among the many Prabhupada stories he shared, he told us that, Prabhupada told us that Krishna will always forgive you. But if Krishna doesn't forgive you, Srimati Radharani will always forgive you. And if Srimati Radharani can't forgive you, I will. Sometimes he talked about rejecting a disciple. If so-and-so doesn't do such and such right now, I will reject him as a disciple. And the devotees came to him afterwards and they said, really? And he said, no, I can't reject any of you. You've come to me for shelter. This is civilized life. If you take shelter of someone, we see this in the 22nd chapter of Madhya Lila, where Lord Chaitanya is instructing Sanatana Goswami. We see this as the chapter where we have the 64 angas of sadhana bhakti. But before that, he talks about sharanagati. Talks about surrender. Faith, talks about shraddha, and he talks about sharanagati, which is the external manifestation of faith. Surrender is the external manifestation of faith. So he says, no, I can't reject any of you. We did test him sometimes, though. Dravida Prabhu?
Go, but I wanted to share this because you mentioned the 4 Kumaras going up and then cursing Jai and Vijay, and then undergoing that transformation by smelling the lotus feet of Vishnu and all that. So there's a verse that they chant of regret and I wanted to share it because I put it into a poem. Kamam babak savijanaya nidiyeshu nakstat cheto livad jadinute padayo rameta bhatas tanas tulasivad jadite ingri shobha puyetate gudaganaya yadikarna randra. So now this is regretting what they did. A birth in hell our sins will surely warrant. Yet please, O Lord, bestow this blessing rare, that all our thoughts, like bees drunk in the torrent of fragrance swirling round your lovely pair of lotus feet, may relish deep remembrance of your sweet pastimes, name and form so fair. That all our words, like Tulsi's leaves so tender, may glory in being offered unto you, and that our ears may ever find fulfillment in hearing of your traits and deeds anew.
Thank you for staying to share that with us. Dravida is feeling the pressure of a next Wednesday deadline for a project that he's working on, and he told me beforehand that he would leave, as he did yesterday at 8:40, but he stayed to share. If anybody wonders why I keep coming back to San Diego, that's one of the reasons right there. You're also a big part. You know who you are. So yeah, thank you so much. Anything else?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for your kindness, for your patience, and your attention. Grantha Raja Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai.